because the Borno people argued rightly that you cannot fight a jihad against a Muslim state. All right. And although for political reasons wars were fought, it was clear that Borno was treated differently from the others. Kano, for example, resisted this war because Kano arguably, they were in fact a far more ancient kingdom and than Sokoto or any of the other ones. But of course, eventually Kano also fell and an emirate was imposed. But even when he had established these emirates, they remained within the Hausa states non-Muslim people who did not accept the new religion. And for years, this what they both discuss pockets of resistance to Islam remained in all of those states. Now, then they moved southwards. You know, of course, that they eventually got to Nupe. They ultimately got to Ilorin. But when it came to the Middle Belt, the jihadists they found that there you had logistic problems because of the topography of the land. And the people could move up to the hills where the cavalry could not operate successfully. So the jihad was halted by the Middle Belt people because they could not overrun it. They just could not overrun these people. And the Middle Belt, as we know them now, therefore were the folks, in fact, who halted the jihad from moving through their land further south. They just couldn't achieve that. And so they stood out as opponents of the jihad. But they suffered for it. Because when the caliphate was established with the emirates in Zaria, Kano, Katsina, whatever, part of the requirement was that each emirate must pay to the caliph. And tributes were paid often in slaves. And by Quranic law, you cannot enslave a Muslim. So the Middle Belt that had escaped Islamization by virtue of their topography became the hunting ground for slaves by emirates for the purpose of paying tribute. So even when the jihad had officially ended, all right, and the emirates had been established, annually you had raids to the Middle Belt to obtain slaves to pay tribute to Sokoto. And that explains the extremely high degree of hostility as between the Middle Belt peoples and the Emirate peoples, because they were the sufferers for years after the caliphate had been established. And consequently, even in political, in terms of present-day politics, from the time of decolonization, that area of Nigeria tended to constitute an opposition to the more northern parts because of what they had suffered at the hands of the jihadists and the emirates post-jihad era. So that decided the kind of relationship between the Middle Belt and the Sokoto Caliphate over the period. And that happened before British rule was established over the Middle Belt. The Middle Belt stopped the advance of the jihad beyond them, southwards. Right. They were able to go around through Nupe and go on to Ilorin and so on, but they could not take the Middle Belt and Islamize the Middle Belt. So the other part of it, what talks about dipping the Quran in the sea, that was not the British doing. It was the doing of the Middle Belt peoples. Except that one of the things that happened with British rule is that when the British came and established their rule in northern Nigeria, they had, as it were, ready-made local government arrangements, if you like, the Emirates. I know the British come from a monarchical system. They are familiar with having a king. So they thought, well, here are the kings. The emirs became kings, as it were, at local government level, through whom they could get their policies executed. Now, they fell in love, if you like, with the emirate system. So as they moved to the Middle Belt areas, they found themselves wanting to establish emirates over non-Muslim people. And
you're rolling? Okay.
So, as I said, the British, enamored of this emirate administration, tried to recreate it, even when it didn't exist in the Middle Belt areas. I'm sure it will amuse people to know that they even appointed houseboys of residents as emirs over peoples in the Middle Belt. And I normally refer to this phenomenon as the Middle Belt having suffered a double imperialism. They suffered that of the British, and they suffered that of the Emirates, because the British tried to recreate the Emirate system among them. Now, of course, the two things are also important here. The vehicle of Muslim scholarship is Arabic, right? And so, Arabization came along with Islam. Even the mode of dressing, for example, which the Muslims of Nigeria adopted in the north, is really the Arabic dress style. And the language of the religion is Arabic. So a Muslim grows up learning Arabic as part of his religion. And as the other cultural traits, therefore, began to follow Islam wherever it went. And when they moved on to the Middle Belt, you had both Arabization and what I describe as Hausization, because the language of local government was Hausa. And Middle Belt people therefore found that they had to speak Hausa, to learn Hausa and speak Hausa, to flow with the British, whose officers were required to pass an exam in Hausa language to administer that area. And that is why you find that in southern Nigeria, we call everybody Hausa. Lokoja upwards, you say the Hausa people. Now that is because of this Hausization of the Middle Belt. But alongside that, in the further north went Arabization. So there was a dichotomy already embedded in the history of what became northern Nigeria. A Muslim people and non-Muslim people, a common lingua franca, which created a false image of unity, which has been exploited politically by the North, such that even non-Muslim Middle Belters have in fact derived advantage over Southerners because they are called Northerners. And the part of the paradox of that is this, that persons who individually, all right, would resist the Muslim pressure, politically benefit by being called Northerners. So they get positions which they would not otherwise have gotten, because they are seen as Northerners, even when they are not Muslim. And that has been part of our history over the years.
Now, the British people had that influence in the north. Why didn't they allow Christianity to flourish in the north when it took root in Nigeria?
Well, part of the answer is that the British conquest of northern Nigeria was not as easy as they thought it might be. Emirate after emirate fought against them. Because after all, these were kafirs, these were unbelievers. In fact, the Sokoto Caliphate should be waging a jihad against England, in theory. But England had the firepower, which the Caliphate did not have. So, Britain eventually subdued these people. But in the process, there was this, let me call it a bargain, that was struck between the Caliph and the British governor, or High Commissioner, as it was called at the time. Namely, that Britain would not disturb the religion of the Caliphate. The British agreed that they would respect the Muslim religion. They would not tamper with it. And because they have so agreed, when missionaries began to come into the country, they were kept away by the governors from the Emirates. And when they moved in at all, they could only operate the Sabangaris, the stranger quarters, where non-indigens, if you like, lived. That's why you will find that if you take a careful look at the north, it was in those Sabangaris that you had Christian churches, not the center of the Emirates, because of this agreement that had been reached. And of course, since the Emirates became a model that Lugard even tried to sell to the south, if the cost of that was going to be respecting the religion, okay, so we respect the religion, but we will take over political power, which of course happened. They took up political power from the emirs, but they respected the religion, and they kept out Christianity and Western European education from those emirates for a long time. So that's how that was the response to Christianity.
Can it be demonstrated that the British were the root cause of intolerance, religious intolerance in Nigeria?
Well, the British...
And what is the history of religious intolerance in Nigeria?